Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 6, Starship Down. This episode first aired November 13th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about the previous episode, which was Rejoined?
No, it was perfect. I do have some additional analysis to add to that episode.
Okay, what else do you have?
Okay, let's go with a really dark theory here. Lenara's behavior was basically revenge because she felt betrayed by Tarius when he died, and then ultimately at the end, she stabbed Dax by just leaving. And my justification for that is the way that when she leaves, she shows no emotion. She doesn't really even look at Dax and is just gone. This was paying Tarius back.
Well, that's very dark, and that would be very mean. I guess it's possible. She also could have been doing it subconsciously.
Ooh, equally as good.
Just a little dig here and there. I don't know. That's mean.
Yes, I've been thinking about that for the last week.
Wow, that's a depressing thing to think about for a week. But okay. Okay, well, that's quite dark and depressing. Maybe we should move on to the next episode then?
Definitely.
All right, in the cold open, the Defiant is in the very dangerous Gamma Quadrant again. I mean, why do we keep going there?
Because it annoys the Dominion, I assume.
Well, anyway, here we are, and it's to meet with the Karemma about their recent trade agreement. I think we've heard Karemma pronounced a few different ways, and I might pronounce it a few different ways today, but let's see. Turns out the Ferengi are intermediaries between the Karemma and the Federation, so I'm sure we already know what these new aliens are complaining about.
Who thought this was a good idea? Who?
Quark.
In the Federation didn't know what the Ferengi are like.
I have no idea. We're in the mess hall with Sisko, Quark, and the Karemma representative, who happens to be none other than James Cromwell, who played Zefram Cochrane, and also right around the same time period, he was the guy in the Talking Pig movie, and I think we referred to him, you and I, as Pig Guy for a long time.
Yes, we
could
did.
Never remember his name, so that's pretty much what I'll be calling him today out of nostalgia.
Perfect.
By the way, he also appeared on Enterprise as Zefram Cochrane, and TNG as a different character. This guy has nearly 200 IMDb credits, but honestly, what matters besides Star Trek and a great movie about a talking pig?
Oh, definitely.
So the pig guy is complaining that using the Ferengi as intermediaries between the Karemma and the Federation has proven too costly because of the taxes and fees imposed by the Ferengi. Quark is being his usual self in this scene of acting like he's doing the obvious and somehow magnanimous thing in these deals. Sisko just glares at him. By the way, Pig Guy is wearing a purple costume. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's actually not terribly flattering, but the color is nice.
It also shows that he's probably about 3 feet taller than Sisko as well.
He's a very tall dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, he keeps ducking through the doorways in this episode, and I just thought, wow, I wonder how many times he hit his head.
Ouch.
Well, then we go to the bridge, and an NPC in a red uniform gives Worf the results of a recent weapons drill. Worf very firmly says he needs to see better results and tells her to schedule another drill. Kira and Dax are working in the corner and kind of look over at this scene, but they don't do anything about it. Dax has a plate of snacks, which seems very strange to see on the bridge. She offers them to Kira, but Kira is fasting for Hamara, which is the anniversary of the emissary's arrival. They fast to show gratitude to the prophets for sending them the emissary.
There's no food allowed on the bridge, by the way.
Well, there shouldn't be. There was a festival of lights in the capital last night, which she had to miss. She thinks Sisko scheduled these negotiations over that festival so he wouldn't have to attend. I'm pretty sure that she's right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we know he has difficulty accepting the fact that he is the emissary of the prophets.
Definitely. Dax agrees, but wonders if he's second-guessing that decision now that he's been stuck in the mess hall with Quark and Pig Guy all morning. Well, suddenly 2 Jem'Hadar warships enter sensor range, and we go to red alert and battle stations, and we cue the theme song. I already like this episode. There's an opportunity for some leadership growth for Worf. Quark is exposed as a greedy jerk. Kira is struggling with her devotion to duty, conflicting with her devotion to her beliefs.
Exactly.
I mean, then there's a red alert, there's the pig guy. We got a lot of good things to cover.
They're throwing an awful lot in just the opening of the show.
Exactly.
You know this is going to be a busy episode.
Yeah, definitely.
I do question, though, why somebody isn't monitoring everything the Ferengi doing. You know they're cheats. You know they're thieves. Why isn't somebody going over every contract with a fine-tooth comb.
I imagine they decided to just accept that risk because, as they say at some point in here, the Jem'Hadar seemed to ignore them completely. And so, that was like their only way in. They were just going to have to put up with some of the shenanigans. But also, I would think you would be worried that you would completely alienate everybody in this quadrant.
Right.
Because that's what happened in the Alpha Quadrant.
Yeah, nobody trusts them anymore.
Exactly.
Even the Nagus realized that.
Yeah. When Sisko and the pig guy arrive at the bridge, we see more of the ridiculousness of Pig Guy's outfit. It's mostly purple, but it has like a gathered gray skirt or something at the front. I don't know. It's very weird and unattractive. It doesn't appear very practical either. Like, I think he would trip over himself with those super long legs. I don't remember what the other Karemma that we've seen was wearing back in the search, but this is definitely ugly.
Might be worth an investigation.
The two Jem'Hadar ships are targeting Pig Guy's ship, which he thinks is to punish his people for doing business with the Federation. Yeah, probably, dude.
You think?
So the pig guy volunteers to give himself up and assume full responsibility to save the people on his ship. But Sisko isn't prepared to let that happen. The Jem'Hadar ships ignore hails and just start firing. When the Karemma ship tries to run away, the Jem'Hadar chases after them. The Karemma ship is also not responding to hails, and they head into the atmosphere of a nearby Class J gas giant. This is not a great idea, as it's a very dangerous environment with wind speeds of over 10,000 kilometers per hour. But in they go, and the cockroach ships follow. Pig Guy says 23 of my people are on that ship, and now they're going to die because I was foolish enough to defy the Dominion. Sisko doesn't think they're going to die.
Somebody has to be the positive one.
Yeah, he's maybe a little overconfident in this episode, as we will find out. He calls Miles and says, we're going into the atmosphere. Everybody looks at each other dramatically to let us know that it's dangerous. Sisko knows the Defiant wasn't built for this, but he's like, it'll be fine.
Wow.
Miles says he'll try to get more power to the structural integrity field.
Shouldn't he really consult with Miles first before they go into the atmosphere?
Yeah, he should ask Miles. Can I go in here?
Yeah.
Miles is just like, yeah, okay.
I'll reinforce the structural integrity fields. They might work, they might not.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Well, we increase shield power, and in we go. It looks a little like driving into a big cloud of just black smoke. Imaging systems and sensors don't work anymore. Sensor range is less than 2 kilometers, so they can't find anyone else. But Dax has an idea of how to increase the range. Sisko sends Pig Guy back to the mess hall to cool his heels. While nothing really works in this atmosphere, including the cloaking device and the torpedo guidance systems, phasers work, but will have to be targeted manually. Kira and Dax have an idea based on something from Kira's past of hiding from the Cardassians in the Badlands, so they start working on that. Now we go down to the mess hall, and Pig Guy is stuck there with Quark. This is a pretty big room for the Defiant, so at least he has a little bit more space than if they were stuck in somebody's quarters.
Yeah.
Quark starts playing his usual shenanigans, and first he blames his idiot brother for everything.
Completely true to form. Blames Rom immediately, throws him under the bus.
Every time. Pig Guy is not impressed and says, if we survive this situation, I will see that you never work in the Gamma Quadrant again. Back to the bridge, and now we're able to scan about 10,000 kilometers, and we still haven't found anything. They do eventually find the Karemma, but the Jem'Hadar also find them and start firing. The Defiant takes a lot of damage and starts losing altitude. Lots of bad things happen, and Dax heads to Jeffrey's Tube 4 to do some power rerouting, and Miles sends an NPC to help her.
They've lost impulse power.
Yeah, and then we have some really weird camera angles on Quark and the Pig Guy in the mess hall. I don't know what that was about. And it also sounds like there's a lot of pressure on the ship's hull, and we hear a bunch of loud creaking sounds. So I'm not sure if that camera angle was to emphasize that, but it's like the only time in the whole episode they do it.
I think they were trying a little bit of Alfred Hitchcock in The Birds, of the crazy camera angles to give a feeling of suspense.
Yeah, maybe. It was a little awkward.
Was this giving you a End of the Wrath of Khan feel?
Oh, absolutely. I have that in several places in my notes where I'm like, oh, Wrath of Khan.
Yes.
Definitely. So back to the bridge, and we're still losing altitude, and the hull is likely to collapse in 6 minutes. Sisko says the Jem'Hadar aren't going to let us tractor the Karemma out of here without a fight. Kira, who seems to be freaking out a little bit, says, seems like we're the ones who need to be tractored out of here. Sisko says, one thing at a time, Major.
He remains remarkably calm in this situation.
Well, I always feel like she goes to survival first.
Yeah.
But Sisko and Starfleet go to rescue first.
Interesting.
Sisko calls Miles and tells him to rig 2 atmospheric probes with the warheads from quantum torpedoes. Miles says that'll take about 20 minutes, and Sisko gives him 10, which makes Miles kind of smile, and off he goes.
Oh, it's good for Miles. He has another project to do.
He does like a project. So Miles and an NPC are working together, and the NPC does not like the sound of the hull collapsing.
No.
Miles says, the captain has gotten us out of worse situations than this, like when they came up against a dozen Jem'Hadar ships last season. The guy says he's heard that story before, and Miles says, well, if you don't want to hear it again, you'd better get to work on those probes. So he takes his little suitcase and heads off to work on the probes.
An observation here. Miles does seem to have mastered the art of delegation now. He's actually giving jobs to other engineers in engineering.
Yeah, and they act in this episode like that's normal.
Yeah.
Like he's really good at that when we have seen no evidence of this before. But maybe he's never really had some other engineers before that he could rely on, and he seems to like these two guys.
Yeah, because he sends the second NPC off to go and get a tool from the cargo bay. And the guy starts walking down the corridor, and there's instantly a hull breach.
Yeah, he's blown across the hall right away.
The NPC is toast. He gets one line, and they kill him. He even got a name, if you noticed. They called him Janklo.
Yeah, he didn't last very long.
Yeah.
And back to the bridge, and now we hear about this hull breach on Deck 2. Dax and Bashir and others need to be cleared out, as the deck needs to be sealed off immediately. Sisko looks very frustrated as we go into a dramatic ad break.
Yeah, Kira says, unless they seal the deck now, they'll lose the whole ship.
Yeah.
She is just the bearer of good news in this episode.
No, she has got nothing but bad news.
Yeah.
We go down to the hull breach and we see Bashir trying to get people past the emergency force field, which will not last much longer. Sisko calls to say, get everybody evacuated so we can seal off the area. Bashir is about to seal the bulkhead when he sees Dax and the NPC she is working with. The force field starts to give and Dax is lost in the smoke. Bashir is ordered to seal the bulkhead immediately, and he does, but he jumps into it first, and he grabs Dax, pulling her away from the failing force field, and he locks the two of them in a nearby room and tries to call the bridge without success.
Why do bridge communications fail?
Good question. Once they seal it off, somehow that means you can't communicate with it? I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
I know, right?
Yeah. I can only imagine that they're in this small sealed room and he doesn't get any bars on his cell phone. I don't know.
Because the story demanded it.
Yes, because the story demanded it. That is exactly the answer. Well, they get power back on the bridge and they're able to pull out of the descent. She did it, Kira says sadly, because as far as they know, Dax was sealed into the breached area.
Yeah, Sisko is looking very contemplative on the bridge. And he has his eyes closed and he's thinking, can anything else go wrong today?
Yeah. How many people can I kill today?
Right.
Miles calls to say one of the atmospheric probes is ready and the other will be ready soon. So now they have something to defend themselves with. They can start looking for the Karemma. Kira looks annoyed that Dax seems to have been sacrificed for this, but she doesn't say anything and she just follows her orders. In the mess hall, Pig Guy and Quark see the lights come back on and Quark says his lobes tell him that they're gaining altitude. So now Quark has moved on from his blame game into buttering up Pig Guy and telling him that he has the lobes for business. This outfit that Quark is wearing is one he's worn before, but it looks like 2 or 3 separate things kind of sewn together into a single jacket, and it's a little puckered at the parts that are sewn together, and it's not his best look, but of course it fits him perfectly.
Well, he's one of the headlining actors, so they'll at least make an effort on his clothes.
Oh, definitely. He tries to convince Pig Guy that they can pull one over on the Federation and become very rich together. But the Pig Guy says, you're despicable.
So he's quite accurate in his summary.
Yes, he's figured him out finally.
Yeah.
Back on the bridge, I mean, we jump around a lot in this episode.
Oh, yeah. This is the episode of fast cuts.
Yes. Back on the bridge, we detect a Jem'Hadar ship. Sisko shuts down all non-essential systems to minimize their power signature. I don't know if you saw this, but everybody gets up, slowly walks to another spot on the bridge and does something. Like Kira
Yes.
flips a lever up and down, and then they all walk back to their original spots and sit down. It was a very awkward and noticeable stage direction.
Right. I guess they had to display them doing something. Otherwise, they would just sit at the consoles and just look like they were pressing a button.
Right. Sisko says to send out the probe, which could ultimately miss the Jem'Hadar and come back and hit the Defiant. Music is very dramatic, and everyone is speaking quietly, and there are a lot of close-ups on faces. This is where I thought it had a very Wrath of Khan feel.
Yes.
So they fire the probe just as the Jem'Hadar starts shooting at them, and everyone flies all over the place. There are lots of explosions, and Sisko hits his head on a panel and falls to the floor.
Lots of those roof beams falling in engineering.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say, that the beams start falling from ceilings, so you know it's serious.
Yeah, it's got to be serious.
The Jem'Hadar continue to fire on the Defiant, but eventually the atmospheric probe finds it and destroys it. But the damage is done on the Defiant, and we are in very bad shape.
All the bridge crew are lying around on the floor, passed out.
Yeah, nobody's looking good. Down in engineering, there's a lot of smoke and tubes hanging from the ceiling.
And beams everywhere.
Yes. Miles tries to call the bridge but gets no response. He thinks there might not be anybody left alive up there. That would be a very short-lived series if that were true.
Yeah. Well, on a positive note, Miles would now be the captain.
Well, no, I don't think he can be the captain. I'm sure there's some other person with a higher rank for some reason because they went to Starfleet Academy.
Ooh.
Isn't that how it works? On the bridge, everyone gets up except Sisko and 2 dead NPCs. This decision to go into the atmosphere has had a very high cost. I mean, how many people are dead here?
Or severely injured. That's a very good point.
Yeah, it's not good.
I am pleased the red shirt NPC, who was the helms person, she survived.
Yeah, she's alive. Only so that she could say everybody else is dead.
I had her down as dead as soon as the Jem'Hadar started firing.
Yeah, she seemed like cannon fodder.
Exactly. And they've been tricking us by giving the NPCs lines before they kill them.
And names.
Oh, yes.
Kira tries to help Sisko with a med kit. He has a concussion and subcranial bleeding. Kira is like, we need a medic, but the comms are down. The remaining NPC volunteers to go and find one. Kira worries that Sisko might slip into a coma, and she's afraid to use a stimulant. Worf suggests trying to keep him awake and giving him something to focus on. He's going to head to engineering and take over the ship from there. She's left alone with Sisko, and she tells him to listen to her and try to stay awake. She says it's very important you listen to me because there's going to be a test later. This makes them both smile, though he is barely conscious.
That's a good plan. Try a little humor. Another option here is she could have said to him, remember what happens to Jake if you die?
Ooh, that would be mean.
It would probably keep him very focused.
I doubt she knows, because these two don't talk about anything like that.
Okay, that's a good point.
Down to Dax and Bashir now, and they're still trapped in a tiny room with no way out and no comms. They've only got a few hours of breathable air.
Yeah, Dax says she is not feeling so good.
No, because she inhaled whatever it was.
Well, Bashir said she inhaled several lungfuls of fluorine gas.
Ugh, yeah, that's not good.
Well, I really think they should try harder on picking better chemicals, because if that was a fluorine atmosphere and they'd been exposed to it, well, for a start, they'd both be blind by now, because fluorine is extremely nasty. Although that really wouldn't matter, because they would have suffocated as it would have dissolved their lungs.
Yikes.
Even at low exposure levels, fluorine is extraordinarily dangerous.
Well, that's terrible.
Yeah, and she got several lungfuls from it.
Well, fortunately, she seems fine, apart from a cough.
Turns out Trill are pretty resilient to it.
Yeah, maybe her lungs are different.
Oh, could be.
Dax thanks him for trying to rescue her, but now they might both die. She says if he had done something like this a year ago, she would have thought he was just trying to be a hero. And he says, well, now what do you think? And she says, I realize now it's just really a stupid thing to do. And then they both laugh. And he says, well, you're welcome.
I like this part of their interaction. It was
Me too.
A good example of gallows humor. They're in this dire situation and she's picking on Julian.
Yeah.
I think it fitted for Dax as well. You talk about her quirky personality. And I thought that is a way that it would come out.
Agreed. In the mess hall, Quark has moved on to his next tactic of admitting that he cheated the Karemma. He says he cheats everyone, and that's just business. You see what you can get away with, and you assume that that's what the other guy is doing. When Pig Guy protests, Quark is like, oh, come on, you've never padded an inventory? He claims not, and that he's always fair. Greed leads to misjudgment. That leads to a loss of profit. But Quark says if there's no risk, there's no thrill. He contends you have to be willing to gamble, but Pig Guy says gambling is the last resource of the desperate. Only a fool risks losing what he has to chance. Quark scoffs.
I'm worried that the Ferengi are going to corrupt the Karemma.
Maybe, if he's trapped in here long enough.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that maybe the Dominion was actually in the right, keeping the Ferengi and the Federation out of the Gamma Quadrant.
Yes, could be right. Worf climbs into engineering to the relief of Miles. He tells him Sisko is injured and he needs to take charge of the ship from here. Then he sees that one of the NPCs configured the helm controls in an improper way and he orders the dude to fix it. Everyone is pretty beat up and nervous. They take Worf's orders, but they seem sensitive about the way he delivers them.
They all seem a little frazzled.
Yeah, I'm not sure that his delivery was that bad, but I guess they're just trying to show that he's maybe not yet great at command.
Well, I found this odd because they're Starfleet personnel. maybe they just lack experience of being in these kind of situations.
Yeah, this might be their absolute first posting. Yeah. They both looked pretty young.
Because I think for Worf, if you look back at his experiences in TNG, I believe he would call this situation Tuesday.
Yeah, totally. It's totally normal. He never seems frazzled at all, except when he starts to get worried about whether or not he's being too mean. On the dark and damaged bridge, Kira is trying to keep Sisko awake. She's been thinking about a 4-shift rotation as a way to give people some flexibility. And then she realizes this topic is too boring and inconsequential to keep him awake.
She could have talked about TPS reports.
She could have. Well, she kind of is, I guess. She doesn't know why this is hard, but she realizes that all they ever talk about when they're together is work. She thinks it's probably not like that with Dax or Chief O'Brien. But she says, then again, you're not a revered figure in their religions. She knows he doesn't like it when she talks about him as the emissary, but that's how she thinks of him, and that makes it hard to relax around him. I bet.
Oh, this was great.
As he seems close to losing consciousness, he grabs her hand and says, Nerys, tell me a story. She says, okay, do you know the one about the 3 brothers who go to Jakala? Why do all alien words have apostrophes? There's so many apostrophes in these words.
It makes them seem more alien-y.
I guess.
I like how in this scene she realizes that there's this barrier between her and Sisko. It's almost been subconscious that she does see him as the emissary, and it makes their relationship on a personal level very difficult.
Yeah, for both of them.
Yeah.
Well, she starts the story, and it's about 3 brothers who are kava farmers, and one day they go into the field and see the biggest kava root they'd ever seen, as big as a house, and so they decide to sell it in the city. Then we go back to engineering, where one of the NPCs picks up 2 small objects closing in on them. Miles shouts, torpedoes, and Worf orders hard a port, and Miles tries modulating the deflectors to confuse the guidance systems. We see the first torpedo fly by and miss them, but the second is still closing, and they don't do anything to try to avoid the second one.
Yeah.
They brace for impact, but really it's just a small jolt in the end.
Bit of an anticlimax.
Except then we jump to the mess hall and we see Pig Guy and Quark staring at an unexploded torpedo stuck halfway into the mess hall.
Great.
I would think that would cause a hull breach too, wouldn't it? I guess somehow it just sealed itself.
Yeah, considering there were thousands of pascals of pressure on the outside of the ship.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, this happens on Discovery, and people complained about it. So, here we are with another callback to this show.
Well, it also happened on Voyager.
Did it? I don't remember.
Yep.
I mean, I watched Voyager, but that was a long time ago, and I think I only watched it once.
Oh.
Well, there's nowhere to run, so Quark thinks they'd better try and defuse the torpedo.
This was impressive. When Quark's life is actually on the line, he can be smart.
Yeah, yeah. He takes his jacket off, he looks for the emergency kit or whatever, and he gets to work.
Yeah. Well, we know he's a little bit of a hacker, so that's probably a good idea.
You'd probably be better off with Rom in this situation.
Oh, that's true. But Quark's good with locks.
He is, and that's what he says. He said he can get the panel off because it's just another lock to pick. In engineering, they realize the torpedo hit in a part of the ship that they're cut off from. Worf gives one of the NPCs some orders, which he kind of argues about, and Worf is like, I'm aware of the situation. If you can't carry out my orders, I'll find someone who can. And the guy's like, okay. Miles then quietly tells Worf that he's riding the men too hard. He says they're out of their element on the ship, and they've not been to Starfleet Academy. They're engineers, and they're used to getting a problem to solve. He says give them a little slack and let them do what they're good at, and give them some encouragement.
I will bring up something here. They're engineers on a Federation starship. Not just a starship, an actual warship. So I find it a little strange here that these guys don't act in a way that I would expect for the engineering team on a Federation warship.
Yeah.
But I guess they lack combat experience, or maybe they completely lack experience because Federation ships aren't usually warships.
Yeah, and like I said, if their first posting was DS9, then this is a very unusual situation for them. Though I really felt like some of this stuff was quite forced, just to try to give some kind of a conflict for Worf. Because, I mean, you're grown-ups in a very stressful situation. You're going to take it, in a different way. You're going to understand that even your leader is under stress, right?
Yeah.
And you're just going to do whatever they say. I mean, you're not going to have your feelings hurt that easily. It was just a little forced.
Right. Because I would expect that in a life and death situation like this, like when you're in combat, the Federation would at least have trained these people to be able to work in stressful environments.
I would think so. And how is it that none of the engineers went to Starfleet Academy?
Well, I could insert here another rant about the concept of enlisted in Starfleet.
Sure, if you would like. If it make you feel better.
No, you can continue.
Oh, okay. Back to the tiny closet with Dax and Julian, and it's getting very cold. They huddle together to keep each other warm. He tells her that he used to fantasize about going on a mission with her in a runabout and getting trapped for a few days.
Julian really needs a counselor on the station.
He definitely does. He said he could never find any other way to spend time alone with her, which is, it's such a problem. She says, you came on so strong, you never gave me the chance to get to know you. Now, I'm going to skip the rest of this terrible scene because it will just irritate me. And I'll just say this. Women do not want to be constantly chased by people that they aren't interested in, especially at work. We don't consider it flattering, we don't find it charming, and we don't think it's cute.
Oh, so you're saying that she really enjoyed being stalked is actually not a good message?
Yeah, because it's just stupid.
So far, this is probably the dumbest scene in season 4.
Easily. Now Worf tries to make nice by asking the engineers to help him figure out a weapon. They come up with an idea to use the deflector array as a phaser emitter. The only problem is it'll only allow one shot. The cute part of this scene is when they talk about how it's going to make a giant mess, and one of them says, well, that's tomorrow's problem. I was like, that's very Miles. I like that.
Yeah.
And then there's a little humor there where one of them is going to be on vacation or something the next day. And Miles is like, don't count on it.
Right. It also demonstrates Worf's flexibility that he's prepared to try a new approach to get to his objective.
Yeah, immediately. That's a good sign of a leader.
Right. Well, and most importantly, I think taking advice from his most senior line manager.
Yes. And I do have a little more about that in the leadership section. Back to the bridge and Kira's story. The brothers were arguing about how to divide the money from the giant kava root, but she can't finish the story as Sisko appears to be crashing. She says this can't happen. The emissary still has so much to do. She doesn't know if it's the right thing to do or not, but she gives him a stimulant. She wonders if he keeps her at arm's length because of her beliefs. She says she doesn't care and she's going to pray, which at this point, I mean, why not? Because things are not looking good.
She is getting very upset at the idea that Sisko could die.
Yeah, I don't think she wants the emissary to die. She's already lost one Kai, and then she's lost Bareil. I don't think she's prepared to also lose the emissary.
You want to keep religious figures and icons away from her because, you know, if Sisko goes, she's like the kiss of death.
Yeah.
Except for Win.
Yeah, why can't she cause damage to the bad ones? In engineering, the new weapon is ready, so they start scanning for the remaining Jem'Hadar ship. Meanwhile, in the mess hall, Pig Guy and Quark are working very carefully on the torpedo. Pig Guy knows that one diode connects the power and the other is the firing mechanism. Turns out the Karemma sell weapons to the Jem'Hadar. Quark points out that perhaps his people do sell some substandard items. And then Pig Guy says maybe he should offer the Jem'Hadar a refund. And then they both laugh like uproariously. And they laugh a little bit too long and the torpedo makes a scary whirring noise. He says we have to remove one of the diodes, but he just doesn't know which one it is. Quark tells him to just pick one. He has a 50-50 chance.
Yes, we're going into the classic, which wire do you cut?
Absolutely. They never show it to us, though.
No.
But he hedges a bit, and Quark says to stop thinking about it, and he just reaches in and pulls one of them out, and luckily it does not explode. They sit down kind of breathless, and Pig Guy says, well, that was exciting. Quark says that's how gambling works. The bigger the risk, the bigger the win. He says, take the bigger risk and stay in business with me. It took a near-death experience for the Pig Guy to agree to talk some more.
Yeah, but the other side of it is, you could point out to the Pig Guy that if Quark had chosen wrongly, you're both dead.
They're all dead, yeah.
Yes, the whole ship.
Yeah, I guess in the moment, you're just happy to be alive.
That's true. Although I feel Quark is exploiting the poor guy.
He totally is. The stimulant finally works, and Sisko opens his eyes again and asks what happened. Kira starts to describe their situation, but he says, no, what happened to the 3 brothers? They gave the money away and went back to the farm where they belonged. That's good, Sisko says. And then he says, tell me another story. Back in the Wrath of Khan, engineering.
Oh, it totally is the Wrath of Khan, isn't it?
We've identified the Jem'Hadar ship. They've located the decoy probe, and the Defiant swoops in behind them and fires the single-shot weapon and destroys them. Everyone is relieved, and Miles says they'd better find the Karemma and get out of there.
I feel they missed an opportunity here to cut back to Worf in engineering, shouting, victory! That would have been awesome.
Yeah, he doesn't usually do that. I think he learned from Picard not to do that.
I think they should bring a little bit more of that Klingon out.
Well, now we're tending to the injured and repairing the ship. We find and rescue Bashir and Dax. A medic revives and saves Sisko. Pig Guy and Quark have reopened negotiations. We go back to the station, and the pig guy is now playing Dabo. Odo recommends he cut his losses, but instead he listens to Quark, although Quark tells him to double down, but he triples down, and of course he wins. Quark is impressed, and Odo laughs that, Quark has lost some money.
Yeah, so Quark effectively has managed to corrupt this race into gambling.
Apparently.
Is this a win? I feel this is more of a loss for the Karma in general.
Any association with the Ferengi is a loss. Nobody comes out a winner. At the bar, Bashir is talking to Morn, who apparently has 17 siblings. Dax rescues him from the conversation and then says, "Now we're even." I thought that was funny.
Even though he appears late in the episode, it's a sighting of Morn, which usually points to it being quite good.
No. I have the data. He's in many terrible episodes.
I reject your facts and replace them with my own.
Do I need to open my spreadsheet? I need to go over that with you. At a nearby table, Miles and Worf are having a drink. One of the engineering NPCs stops by with the repair plans for the Defiant. Worf tells him to proceed at his own discretion, which makes the dude very happy. He says the repairs will take 16 hours, but Miles thinks he can do it in 12. And the guy's like, okay, sure, no problem, and leaves. Miles says you give them a little slack, but you can't take your hands off the reins. This seems to really confuse Worf, and it should. This is not helpful advice to someone who does not understand people.
Well, yeah, especially coming from the Klingon perspective.
Yeah.
And I think coming from the Enterprise as well.
Oh, yeah. He's never seen this.
Yeah. We saw that with Geordi giving his 110 every single time on everything.
Right. Yeah.
I believe he even says that to Scotty in the episode where Scotty appears, that you give the exact estimate, you don't pad.
Oh, yeah. And Scotty's like, what kind of engineer are you?
Right.
Scotty and Miles would have gotten along.
Oh, I think so.
I guess that's the point. I suppose Miles was supposed to kind of be in the same vein.
Right.
Well, in Sisko's office, Kira is giving him an update on the Karemma transport and on the Defiant repairs. Sisko said it occurred to him that we might want to consider going to a 4-shift rotation. The crew might appreciate the flexibility. She smiles and starts to leave. Then he asks what she's doing for the next few hours, and she's going off duty, so she was just going to relax. He invites her to a baseball game on the holosuite. This is a much better reason for her to break her rule of never going to the holosuite.
Yes, I would agree.
He gives her a baseball cap and tells her to get the hot dogs from Quark. And she's like, hot dogs? Sisko says, he'll know. The end.
Oh, that was great. I like how Sisko was the one reaching out to her to try and break down those barriers.
Agreed.
I thought that was a very good Sisko move. And I guess probably because of the stress of the situation that they're in and what's happening in the Alpha Quadrant right now.
Yeah.
That he's really let that get away from him.
Yeah, right. Well, do you have over-analysis?
Why, I have a couple of points of over-analysis.
Okay.
So the first point, when the force field failed, they're in a gas giant's atmosphere that has millions of pascals of pressure pushing down on the ship's hull. As soon as that force field failed and allowed the atmosphere in, there would be so much pressure in the ship, the thing would just collapse. They'd all be dead.
Yeah.
That didn't really seem to fit.
Well, up to the part that they had sealed off, right? Up to the bulkhead.
Yes. But are those bulkheads able to withstand millions of pounds of pressure?
I do believe that's what we're supposed to believe. I think that's happened many times in Trek where they have to seal something off because of a hull breach and they have to seal it off to the bulkhead. And then that is supposed to be able to take as much pressure as the outside of the ship. I don't know. It takes as much pressure as the story needs it to take, right? That's always what we say.
Okay. I will accept that as a point.
Yeah, okay.
It's a MacGuffin.
Okay. It's kind of like when the torpedo doesn't cause a hull breach.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay, my next point.
Yeah.
Maybe there is something more to the Federation doing trade with the Karma. They're supplying weapons to the Jem'Hadar.
Yep.
This could be a way that the Federation is getting information on the Jem'Hadar's abilities and what they're armed with, maybe countermeasures. So my take is the Federation are basically using or are spying through the Karma to get information on Dominion weaponry.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I think that's a pretty good take, and it's a definite possibility.
Especially when this guy said he saw schematics for it. So maybe he actually has access. So there's a subplot under this. He's a spy.
Maybe. Yeah, that's a good over-analysis point.
Thank you. Well, my next point is about the gas, but I already brought that up of I don't think they'd be in a very good situation, trapped in the small room with a lot of fluorine gas floating around.
No.
I was reading OSHA documents on safety regarding the gas and was like, yeah, they're dead.
I also think there should be some gas masks kind of at these bulkheads as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like have a few spacesuits or something around the place.
Yeah.
Good plan. And really, I think that kind of wraps it up.
I had a couple of things.
Go.
It's so weird that we had this happy ending, considering how many people are dead at the end of this thing.
Yeah, but they were all enlisted personnel, so they didn't really count.
No. There were 2 bridge crew.
A temporary assignment.
Oh. This decision to go into the atmosphere to protect the Karemma and the trade deal had a very high cost.
Yeah.
It cost them at least 3 crew members.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It almost cost them Sisko, Dax, and Bashir. Was it worth it?
Well, this is where my point of they were getting military secrets from the Karemma. Maybe Sisko is briefed that we need to keep this asset safe at all costs.
I guess that's probable. I just kept thinking that, maybe in the long run, this was a good decision, but how many times do captains make this kind of decisions and it's not worth it? And, it just ends up costing you crew members or the whole ship, because it easily could have been the whole ship.
Right.
And it all came down to Sisko making that decision and just saying, oh, it'll be fine. I know the Defiant isn't made for this, but, everything's going to be okay. So he's wholly responsible for this. So he better have had some other bigger reason why he was doing it, because I did not think this was a good decision.
Yeah, I thought about that too. And I didn't have this as an analysis point. Maybe I should have, which was Sisko making this decision to go into a planet with a ship that was not designed to do atmospheric maneuvers.
Yeah.
And taking a huge risk. And I thought it was odd that he didn't consult Miles. Surely your chief engineer, the guy who knows this ship inside and out, would be the guy to say, can I do this? How do we do it? Is it safe?
Yeah, I totally agree.
So in an alternative timeline, this was actually the end of Deep Space Nine when they flew into the atmosphere and the ship was instantly crushed.
And everybody died. My last overanalysis point is, do we not think that this made things with the Dominion worse? I mean, won't they now target the Karemma?
Well, this is what I was wondering as well. And I have a theory here.
Yeah.
They talked about how the Karemma don't actually communicate and deal with the Dominion directly. Remember, they send information. They talk to them through subspace relays.
Right.
As far as we know, the Vorta don't even talk to them. So I'm wondering if the Jem'Hadar ships in this situation were just on a patrol or just noticed the Federation vessel or maybe even followed the warp signature of the Defiant and went to see what they were up to or where they were going.
Yeah.
So the Dominion doesn't necessarily know that the Karemma are dealing with the Ferengi stroke the Federation. And it was just an unlucky coincidence.
Wow.
But wouldn't it be incredibly dangerous, though, for the Karemma?
Yes. Because when we first met the Dominion, the first story was about how they they were just wiping people out. So yeah, all of them would be at risk now.
And I believe the Karemma guy, when we first met them, said that if you didn't do what they said, they would just send in the Jem'Hadar.
Yeah.
So I would think they would put the hammer down on this and send a transmission saying, you don't deal with the Ferengi. End of story. End of transmission.
Well, maybe that's what will happen, I guess, but I'll accept your headcanon here because I have nothing else to go on.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about leadership and Worf.
Okay.
I think of how difficult leadership would be across these different alien races. I mean, it's difficult enough just across different types of human beings.
Right.
Like just this week, there was some management training at my work, and one of my managers said to me, so many feelings. Which meant there was so much talk about your employees' feelings and dealing with their feelings. It's so true. To be an empathetic leader, you have to respect that people do have feelings.
Yeah.
And we're sort of trying to show that in this episode. I'm not sure we did it quite right, as we talked a little bit about earlier. But for me, you build those relationships outside of the really harrowing, stressful situations so that in those situations, you have a shorthand. You don't have to go out of your way to make people feel better under duress if you spend the rest of the time letting them know that you do care about them and you are there to help them and protect them and whatever. The tenets of getting people to follow you are trust, compassion, stability, and hope. I say it all the time. If you work with me, you hear it all the time. If you provide those 4 things, then people will rise up when you need them to. And I feel like that's what Worf needs to work on. He needs to work on it outside of those stressful situations so that in those stressful situations, everybody just does their job. You don't have to worry about hurting people's feelings.
And I would think that would mean bridge crew being in engineering more.
Yes, more interactions. Yeah.
You would need to break down those walls between the enlisted peons, who are like the peasantry, and the royalty who live in the high bridge.
Right. And on this show, breaking those walls down means that you're playing darts and hanging out in quarks. But, realistically, you're having one-on-ones and you're finding ways to connect and you're listening to their problems and trying to help them through their problems. But, they're never going to show stuff like that on a TV show.
And this leads me on to my theory of the Star Trek leadership. In this situation where Sisko is out of action, but ultimately they have an engineering and a science problem, this would be where Miles should be the one in charge. Worf should be looking after the defenses of the ship, but should not necessarily be making any engineering calls. That's my idea or concept of the flexible leadership. We need to get the ship to a working state. We also need to defend it. Working state is slightly higher than the defense, so Miles is effectively in command and everyone defers to him. Soon as the ship is back up and running, they need to be in a defense mode, which means Worf is back in charge. And then once you get Sisko back on his feet and the medic is able to look after him, if Sisko's physically fit, Sisko is in charge or could delegate. This is sort of the concept I have there. And you lose Worf's automatically in charge because Miles is just a peasant.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but I do wonder if maybe you don't necessarily want to distract that engineering person with the other things of worrying about the other people on the ship, worrying about that bigger picture that we were talking about the trade deal and the Karemma and the Dominion and whatever. And you just want them focused on, you got to fix the ship, you got to get us weapons, you got to do these engineering things. Don't be distracted by, being worried about Dax and Bashir being locked in a closet somewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
yeah.
Maybe there's something to keeping the engineers in engineering and not worried about the other thing. And I would also say this is where it makes sense to me all of a sudden that we have arrived here. And we've talked about this now so many times outside of the podcast and inside the podcast. But if your person in leadership, your captain, has gone through Starfleet Academy, so has the engineering know-how and skills, they're able to also think about engineering problems and think about ways out, but they're also aware of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So now suddenly it makes sense, like when Janeway could be an engineer and Picard would have some ideas about engineering, whatever. They weren't the best engineers or the smartest ones or the ones who came up with the answers. They also had somebody else doing all of that. But they at least do have enough of the big picture that they're able to command the ship and they're able to keep that big picture in mind.
Gotcha. So the strategic versus tactical thinking.
Yes. They've got enough of the tactical to get by, but they've got the strategic to keep them all alive. So Now it suddenly makes sense to me.
That's a great take.
Maybe enough people have been telling me their opinions. It finally sunk in. I don't know.
I feel we will be having more offline discussions about this in the future.
I'm sure we will. Well, let's go to women in the future. For a change, there's some stuff to talk about because there's some women in the episodes. It's been a little quiet lately.
And they didn't kill the woman who was on the bridge.
That's true. The one NPC they kept alive was a woman. Well, I've learned to really like how they portray Kira's inner conflict with her religion versus her duty. I don't honestly think they show it enough. If it were truly that crucial to her life, it would come up more frequently, I would imagine. But I wonder if they're holding back a little bit so as not to make the show, a show about religion, which I wouldn't care, but I'm sure they thought that was going to not get them ratings. But realistically, it just seems like she'd be a little bit more beholden to it than she is, because you're supposed to believe how devout she is.
Right.
But she portrays this really well, and I liked it here. And, she let Worf take over running the ship, and she just focused on keeping Sisko alive. But isn't she first officer? Wouldn't she have been second in command? Shouldn't she have been the one who went to engineering, and Worf should have stayed talking to the captain?
You will just gloss over that bit.
Okay. Then we'll go to Dax. And again, Dax saved them. She was the one who had the science answer to pull them up from the descent that nobody else could figure out how to stop.
She brought power back online.
Exactly. But she's awfully valuable to just allow her to be into some extremely situation and to just cut her off, whatever, just close the door. It's fine. We'll seal her off. I'm glad Bashir did the heroic or the stupid thing, whatever it was, to save her. But did we really have to venture down that, oh, you like it when I chase you path? I mean, everything was actually going okay in that conversation until then, and I was super disappointed in that. But that is it for my women in the future.
Okay.
So let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Okay. I am giving this a thumbs up. This was an enjoyable episode. There was action, there was drama, there was humor. It encapsulated a lot of Star Trek. And of course, at the end, everybody is fine, including Sisko, who was brain hemorrhaging 5 seconds before.
Yeah, and he was fine.
I also felt it very much pointed back to things like The Wrath of Khan.
Yes.
It also had aspects of, I tried searching for it and I couldn't find it. I thought there was a submarine movie that was very much like this.
Oh.
Like, I'm talking like 40s or maybe 1950s, like an old movie.
Well, absolutely, especially the torpedoes part, when they were showing the torpedoes and trying to miss it. I mean, even Hunt for Red October and some of the obvious ones, I thought of that too. Yeah.
So I thought it had elements from multiple things that were sort of brought together and mixed into a great Star Trek episode.
Right. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I give it a thumbs up. I liked almost all of it. The Dax thing that I mentioned was really the only thumbs down part of it to me.
Yeah.
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I liked all these stories, I know I've said it before, where they get cut off from each other and they have to trust that the others are just doing their job and doing their thing and saving their part. And they got to deal with their section right in front of them. I think that's a really cool thing when they do that in Star Trek, and I quite like it.
Yeah.
Okay, is that it?
I think that's it for this episode.
That wraps it up for Season 4, Episode 6. Come back next week for Episode 7. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Also, check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback there as well, but most importantly, you can find our new podcast, Star Trek Prodigy, a Rebingeit podcast, where we are recapping and reviewing the new animated series each week. You can find this podcast on talkthroughmedia.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.